Zariah Moore walked into the room with one sentence that silenced Big Shaq.
My mom is sick, so I came instead.
But nothing about her story was simple. No records, no past, just a trail of buried truths in a town that smiled while it erased her. Now, as Shaq uncovers what Windermere tried to forget, one question remains. Was she sent, or did the silence call her? This isn't just a story, it's the reckoning that no one saw coming. Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel, and tell us where are you watching from. Share in the comments below. It was supposed to be just another charity visit. Nothing more than smiles, photos, and warm meals, until he saw the girl standing alone. The road into Windermere curled like a ribbon around low hills and half-forgotten fences, where the paint had long since given up. Shaquille O'Neal sat in the back of a black SUV, one hand resting on his knee, the other lightly gripping a folder of speech notes he didn't plan to use. He'd been to enough towns like this one to know what to expect. Modest school gyms, proud handshakes, a few teary parents, and kids trying to act too cool to smile. Still, he believed in the work, not just in the foundations or the press, but in the stories he could change, one kid at a time. As the vehicle slowed through Windermere's main road, a cluster of old buildings passed by his window. Feed stores, a diner called Cora's Place, a church with a cracked sign reading "All are welcome here." He noticed the sideways glances. The men on porches paused mid-sentence, the servers in aprons half-turned. The stillness wasn't aggressive, just tight-lipped. A town used to keeping things contained. Shaq's SUV pulled into the parking lot of Windermere Community Center. Modest brick, surrounded by neat shrubs and a Too Bright Youth Tomorrow Festival banner flapping overhead. A band of volunteers met him at the entrance. He stepped out into the daylight, towering above them but lowering his shoulders, trying to seem smaller. His smile was soft, his voice humble. "Appreciate y'all having me." Inside, the air smelled like lemonade and fresh popped popcorn. The basketball court had been dressed up with folding tables, streamers, and banners plastered with slogans like "Uplift Our Future" and "Hope Starts Here." Local kids, mostly white, hovered around the tables, half whispering to one another, sneaking glances at him with a mixture of awe and wariness. Shaq moved through them like a gentle giant, high-fiving one, shaking hands with another, crouching to speak at their level. He asked names, told them stories, dropped jokes only half of them understood. The laughter was uneven. Parents hovered close by, watching with something between suspicion and polite tolerance. It wasn't overt. No one said anything wrong. No one did anything wrong. But Shaq had lived enough life to feel the difference between warmth and watchfulness. He was halfway through a photo op by the mural wall when he first saw her. She stood near the back of the room, close to the exit door, partially hidden behind a stack of folding chairs. She wasn't like the other kids. No bright shirt, no name badge, no phone in hand. Her braids were messy, her jeans were worn, and her stare? It was as steady as a grown woman's, like she'd already learned what people could do when no one was watching. Shaq gave a quick nod to the camera crew and made his way toward her. One of the volunteers, a thin-lipped woman named Ms. Callahan, stepped into his path, whispering, "We don't know that one. She's not on the list." Shaq didn't break stride. When he reached the girl, he crouched slightly, bringing his eye level down to hers. "Hey, I'm Shaq." She blinked once, then said something so soft, he almost missed it. "My mom is sick, so I came instead." The words weren't rehearsed. They weren't seeking pity. She said them like a fact, like a weather report, and then she looked away. Shaq didn't speak for a moment. He just stood there beside her, taking in the way her jaw stayed tight, her fists lightly clenched at her sides. She was trying to stay invisible, but the weight of her pain made her stand out like a scream in a quiet church. "What's your name?" he asked gently. "Zariah," she replied, eyes still averted. Miss Callahan hovered behind him, arms folded, eyes narrow. "She doesn't belong to any group. Probably wandered in off the street." "I want her to stay," Shaq said without turning. Callahan blinked. "We have a schedule. I'll adjust it." The silence that followed was louder than the music playing from the speakers. Shaq turned back to Zariah. "Come on," he said. "You hungry?" She didn't answer, but she followed him toward the refreshment table. As they walked together, the stares returned. Children eyed her warily. Parents stiffened. A boy moved away when she stepped near the lemonade, and Zariah, still silent, noticed it all. The smile she had worn to get through the door disappeared like smoke. Shaq watched it happen, and something in his chest tightened. After the event's first speaker wrapped up, Shaq took the microphone. He thanked the town for the invitation, spoke warmly about the youth, shared stories of kids he'd met from New Jersey to Mississippi, but his eyes kept drifting to Zariah, now sitting alone at a corner table, untouched plate in front of her. He didn't mention her name. He didn't have to. I always say, he told the crowd, some kids show up with more on their shoulders than others, and sometimes the most important thing we can do is see them. Not judge them, not fix them, just see them. Polite applause followed. A few people nodded, but not many looked over at Zariah. Afterward, as the crowd dispersed into workshops and games, Shaq stayed behind. He found Zariah by the vending machines. You okay? He asked. She shrugged. I'm used to it. Used to what? Being the wrong kind of quiet, wrong kind of black, wrong kind of girl. Shaq leaned against the wall beside her. You're not wrong, Zariah. Maybe this place is just wrong for you. She didn't reply, but she didn't walk away, either. Outside, the afternoon sun began to tilt westward. The sound of kids laughing drifted in from the basketball court, but something inside the community center had shifted. Shaq's security gave him a light nudge. Time to go. Another event in another town. He looked back at Zariah. Where's home for you? She tilted her head. Wherever my mom is, but she don't talk much anymore. He wanted to ask more, but she turned away. Shaq walked out of the center slower than he came in. The fresh air didn't taste as clean. The goodbye waves felt hollow. As he stepped into the SUV, he looked back through the tinted glass. Zariah was still standing in the doorway. Alone. Not waiting for anyone. Just watching. And for the first time in a long time, Shaq felt like he was the one being seen. Seen for what he hadn't done yet. For what still needed to be done. For a piece that wasn't as promised as it had seemed when he arrived. She wasn't supposed to be there. No records. No name tag. Just truth in her voice and pain in her eyes. Shaq stayed longer than planned. He usually didn't. These events followed a schedule. Arrive, speak, inspire, leave. But something about Windmere made him slow his steps, watch more closely. And it wasn't the town, it was the girl, Zariah, the one who slipped through cracks that polite society liked to pretend didn't exist. After their brief exchange, Zariah had melted into the background again, sitting near a rack of unused folding chairs, while the main crowd drifted toward the schoolyard for afternoon activities. She hadn't eaten much, hadn't smiled, and yet she stayed. That alone told Shaq something. In towns like this, staying took courage. He asked one of his team members, Kevon, to find her on the roster, just to be sure. Kevon returned with a tight expression and an empty clipboard. She's not listed, at all. Check with the volunteers, Shaq said, already half knowing the answer.
They asked around.
Ms. Callahan again. The woman's lips pressed thin like chalk lines. She doesn't go to Windmere Middle. I know all our kids, never seen her before. Could she be from another district? Kevon suggested, trying to smooth things over. Callahan gave a look. The kind people used when they didn't say what they wanted, but said it loud all the same. I doubt she's anyone's responsibility. Some of these families move around. No stability. The word these stuck like a tack in the skin. Shaq said nothing, but inside, something pressed down hard on his ribs. He excused himself from the next rotation, crafts and team-building games, and returned to the community center alone. The building was quieter now. A janitor swept confetti near the doorway. Soft gospel music played low from the speakers. Shaq found Zariah exactly where he'd left her. Only now she had an open notebook on the table in front of her. The pages were filled with sketches, bold lines, dark eyes, faces full of heat. No words, just emotion. You draw? Shaq asked, stepping closer. Zariah closed the notebook in one quiet motion. Not for people. You think I don't count as people? She glanced up just once, and the corner of her mouth twitched. Not a smile, but not quite indifference either. You're tall enough to be too. Shaq chuckled softly, then pulled out the folding chair beside her and sat, careful not to make it creak. Where you from, Zariah? She didn't answer immediately. Her fingers tapped against the metal table, keeping time with the music. Here, she finally said. But not from here. Lived here long?
My whole life. Doesn't mean I belong.
It wasn't bitterness. It was resignation. Like someone who had walked the same street 100 times and still felt like a trespasser. Shaq leaned forward, elbows on the table. Your mom, she really sick? Zariah gave a half shrug. Depends on the day. She used to work in a clinic in town. But then she got tired. Started sleeping a lot. Not like naps. Like days. Nobody came when I called. Shaq's brow furrowed. Nobody came? No. Said we weren't in the system. No ID. No insurance. The clinic closed, so I stopped calling. The words weren't angry. They were just empty, like she'd already let go of hoping. "Where's your dad?" "Haven't seen him since I was 6, maybe 5. He wasn't sick, he just left." Shaq exhaled slowly. Every story like this pressed into him, one more stone in the weight he carried quietly. "Delilah, that's her name," Zariah added. "My mom, if you want to call her that." Shaq looked at her sharply. "She's not your mom?" Zariah's gaze flicked to the side, and for the first time he saw hesitation, not fear, just calculation. "She's the only one I had." Shaq didn't press. He knew the tone, knew when to ask, and when to let people sit with their truths. They sat in silence for a moment, the hum of fluorescent lights filling the gaps. Outside, a whistle blew, followed by laughter. A staff member peeked in to check on Shaq, but backed off when he saw the conversation unfolding. "What do you want, Zariah?" he asked quietly. She tilted her head. "You mean right now?" "Yeah, right now." She looked around. "A Coke, maybe a charger for my phone, and maybe for people to stop looking at me like I'm a crack in the floor." Shaq stood and walked to the vending machine. Came back with 2 sodas, set one in front of her. "I think cracks are where the light gets in," he said. "That's something people with houses say," she muttered. Shaq gave a small laugh. She was sharper than most adults he knew. Outside, the weather began to shift. The once clear sky clouded, and the light through the windows dimmed slightly. The warmth from earlier felt farther away. He looked back at her. "You want to stay here for the rest of the event?" Zari didn't answer right away. Then, "I came for something. Not sure what it was yet, but I'll know when I find it." "Maybe you already did," he said gently. She finally looked at him, really looked, and her expression softened. For the first time, her eyes didn't carry that defensive weight. Just for a second. Then it returned. "Don't make this into a movie scene, Shaq," she said. "I ain't nobody's lesson." He nodded. "Fair enough." That afternoon, Shaq made sure she had a seat at every activity. When someone tried to nudge her out of line at the arts tent, he stepped in without raising his voice. When she hesitated before grabbing food, he walked with her. Not beside her, with her. The townspeople noticed. Whispers drifted like pollen. Some murmured about favoritism, others about boundaries. A few kids asked why she was here, if she wasn't from the school. Zariah didn't answer. She didn't need to. The weight of her presence, the defiance of simply being there was answer enough. By the end of the day, she hadn't said much more, but she had taken a flyer from one of the booths, tucked it into her back pocket, and when Shaq told her he was heading out but would be back tomorrow, she didn't ask for a ride or offer a goodbye. She just said, "I'll be around." And with that, she walked away. No escort, no wave. Just a 14-year-old black girl, disappearing down a cracked sidewalk in a town that never bothered to learn her name. But now Shaq knew it. And that changed everything. Shaq had looked into the eyes of athletes, soldiers, survivors, but never eyes that told him so much with so little. There was something about the way Zariah looked at people that made them uncomfortable. Not scared, just seen. It wasn't the kind of eye contact that demanded attention. It was the kind that dared you to lie. Her gaze didn't flinch or beg. It just waited. Quiet, heavy, watching. The morning after the youth event, Shaq returned to Winmere's community center earlier than scheduled. He'd told his team he wanted to walk the town a bit, get a feel for the place, but in truth, he was hoping he'd see her again, and he did. Zariah sat on the back steps of the building, eating a packet of saltines like they were dinner. She didn't react when he approached, didn't smile, didn't move, just offered him the kind of silence that demanded respect. "Didn't think you'd show up again," she said without looking up. "I said I'd be back." "Yeah, well, people say a lot of things." She crumbled a cracker between her fingers and tossed the dust to the ants below. "You eat anything real today?" he asked. That's a big word for this town. Real. Shaq sat beside her, the concrete step creaking under his weight. The air was warmer than yesterday, the humidity rising slow but steady. It clung to his arms and tightened his throat. Or maybe that was just the mood. "You always talk like that," he asked. "Like the world owes you something it ain't ever gonna give?" Zariah shrugged. "The world don't owe me nothing. I just don't feel like pretending it does." He studied her profile. Her jaw was tense, shoulders square, but her eyes, they softened at the edges, just enough to betray the armor. Not that she'd admit it. "Where's your mom today?" he asked. Zariah took a breath, long and slow. "Still in bed. Same as yesterday. Might wake up, might not. Doesn't matter. I left a note and made sure she had water." You taking care of her by yourself? No one else will. It wasn't self-pity. It was structure. A fact. A piece of her life no more dramatic than brushing her teeth. And that unsettled Shaq more than anything. Inside the community center, the event was gearing up again. Louder than yesterday. More kids, more parents, more decorations. But out here on the back steps, it felt like the only truth in the town was sitting beside him in old sneakers and a fading hoodie. He leaned forward, arms resting on his knees. People around here treat you like a stranger. Why's that? She finally looked at him. That look sharp, hollow, precise. Cut through his question like a blade. Because I don't look like their version of safe, she said. I don't say sir. I don't shrink. I show up where I'm not invited. I don't laugh when their kids make jokes they know they shouldn't make. Shaq clenched his jaw. He'd felt it too. The tension in the air yesterday. The way adults measured their words around him, but let their eyes speak without mercy. I talked to Ms. Callahan yesterday, he said, asked if anyone checked in on your mom. Zariah gave a dry laugh. Ms. Callahan wouldn't cross the street if my mom was on fire. She said you weren't on any of the school rolls, that you never went to Windmere Middle.
Didn't need to.
You were homeschooled. No. He turned his head. Then how? I wasn't supposed to be here, she interrupted. Silence. Shaq sat with the weight of that. He didn't press, just waited. Zariah looked down at her hands. The crackers were gone. She wiped her palms on her jeans, then rested them on her knees. She took me in when I was 6. I don't know if it was legal. I don't think she cared. My real mom, she died, or disappeared. I don't know which. Nobody ever said. Shaq didn't move, didn't blink. She was working here. My mom, not Delilah, the other one. She cleaned houses, for the white folks. One day she didn't come home. Cops said she probably left, that maybe she wasn't fit to be a mother. But I remember her. She was tired, not gone. There's a difference. Shaq felt the slow burn rise in his chest. So Delilah took you in? Yeah. Nobody wanted to deal with paperwork. Or me. She had a trailer out past the gravel road. That's where I stayed. That's where I still stay. You ever go to school? Once. They told me I needed immunization records. ID, proof I wasn't lying about who I was. Delilah didn't have any of it, so I just stopped going. Shaq nodded slowly. And no one checked on you? Nope, not unless you count a gas station clerk who told me once that people like me didn't usually stick around. He closed his eyes for a second, took a deep breath. This wasn't just neglect. This was a slow erasure, one the town had sanctioned by pretending it wasn't happening. Inside, the speakers started playing an upbeat track. Kids laughed. A teacher's voice called names over a megaphone. But here, the mood was dense with unspoken grief. Zariah, he said. You ever want out? She stood, brushed off her jeans. You don't get out when no one ever lets you in. He rose with her. You think this is how it's always gonna be? I think people don't like mirrors, and I'm a mirror. As she started walking back toward the building, Shaq watched her carefully. Her shoulders didn't sag, but they carried something, a history too heavy for her frame. He followed her inside, where a few volunteers shifted uncomfortably at her return. Miss Callahan whispered something to another staff member. Eyes trailed Zariah like rumors. Shaq pulled Kavan aside. I want every document the town has on her, or Delilah. Medical, school, welfare, anything. Kavan raised an eyebrow. That might be a mess. Then start with the mess. Over the next hour, the contrast sharpened. Shaq ran workshops, signed shirts, posed for pictures, but his focus kept drifting. Every time Zariah passed through the room, the energy changed. People pulled their kids closer. Smiles thinned. Her existence wasn't just inconvenient, it was threatening. Later that afternoon, Kavan returned, holding a small stack of photocopied papers. Got something. Shaq took the papers to the staff room, closed the door behind him. The documents were shallow, disconnected. A food stamp application from 5 years ago under Zariah Moore's name. No dependent listed. A dismissed report from a neighbor complaining about noise, no follow-up. And a school district letter from 7 years back, Zariah's name scribbled in the margins, then crossed out. Nothing, but everything. She was never supposed to be here, Shaq whispered. No records, no ID, no school. She'd been invisible her whole life, and the town had built itself around that silence. Pretending she didn't exist made it easier to ignore what had been done, or what hadn't. He folded the papers and slipped them into his coat pocket. That evening, he found Zariah waiting by the exit doors. She wasn't looking for him, but she didn't look surprised when he came. "You still hungry?" he asked. She gave a sideways glance. "What's it matter?" "It matters if someone starts giving a damn." She didn't move. He held the door open. "Come on, let's find you something real to eat." Zariah hesitated. Just for a second. Then she stepped forward. And the door shut behind them like punctuation at the end of a sentence that had been waiting years to be spoken. He always believed kindness was universal, until he saw it used as camouflage. The town of Windermere looked different in the morning. The sun hadn't yet burned through the clouds, and a quiet fog clung to the streets like secrets refusing to lift. Shaq drove himself that day. He wanted to feel the road, to move on his own terms. The GPS signal cut out a few miles outside the community center, so he relied on the hand-drawn map Zariah had sketched on a napkin the night before, her handwriting tight and deliberate. She hadn't wanted him to come. She hadn't exactly forbidden it either. She'd said only, "It's not your kind of place." And maybe that was exactly why he had to see it. The paved road ended abruptly at a set of rusting mailboxes. The dirt trail that followed was narrow and cracked with tree roots. As his tires kicked up dust, Shaq passed rusted-out cars, overgrown lots, a clothesline strung between two trees with sun-bleached t-shirts flapping like surrendered flags. Then he saw it, the trailer, half sunk on one side, like it had lost the will to stand straight. One window was taped with cardboard. A caved-in porch step sagged beneath a cracked welcome mat that read, "Bless this mess." He parked under a leaning pine and stepped out slowly. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was still, like everything around him had been holding its breath for too long. He knocked once, then again, no answer. He tried the handle. The door opened with a tired creak. The air inside was heavy with the sour edge of neglect. Stale food, medicine, damp wood. The small living room was cluttered but not filthy. Faded photo frames sat on a shelf. A broken fan whirred near the floor, pushing heat in circles. "Zariah?" he called gently, not expecting her to be there. She wasn't. Then he saw the bedroom door ajar at the end of the hall. He stepped closer, slowly, quietly. Delilah Moore lay on the mattress, curled toward the wall. She was thinner than he remembered from the foundation file photo, a face he now recognized from a black-and-white ID copy Kavan had pulled. Her skin was pale under dark freckles, and her arms were marked with faint bruises, not from violence, but from the absence of care. "Ms. Moore?" Shaq said softly, his deep voice echoing unnaturally in the silence. "Delilah?" No response. He stepped closer and noticed the tray beside the bed. Saltine wrappers, an empty cup, a bottle of expired cough syrup. No medical chart, no prescriptions, no IV. Just slow, shallow breathing. Shaq pulled out his phone, heart heavy, thumb hovering over the emergency dial. But he paused. Zariah had said no one came when they called. He dialed anyway. He listened to the tone, the hollow ring. Then a clipped voice answered. "Dispatch." He explained the location, the condition, the urgency. The dispatcher paused. "Then we don't service that zone. That's considered off-grid. You'll need to transport the patient to county." Shaq's voice dropped. "She's unconscious. There's no transport. You're telling me no one can come here?" A longer pause this time. "Is the patient a legal resident of Windermere?" the voice asked, almost mechanically. Shaq felt the heat crawl up his neck. "She's a human being, and she needs help. We've had repeated misuse of emergency services at that address. Sorry, we can't assist." The call cut. He stared at the screen, then at Delilah. Zariah had been telling the truth, every chilling word of it. He moved to the kitchen, filled a glass with filtered water from a jug, returned to her bedside, and slowly helped wet her lips. She stirred slightly but didn't wake. Shaq sat beside the bed for a long moment. Listening, processing. He wasn't used to feeling helpless, but this wasn't about strength. It was about erasure. And now he was in the middle of it. He noticed a box near the nightstand, an old metal filing case. Inside were wrinkled documents, newspaper clippings, and a few school applications, all denied. At the bottom was a copy of a letter unsent, crumpled. It was addressed to the Windermere Town Council, dated 2 years ago. "To whom it may concern.
This child lives here. She deserves to be educated, protected, and acknowledged. I may not have the right paperwork, but she has the right to be a child. Her name is Zariah. She matters."
No signature, just DM. Shaq folded the letter and placed it in his coat pocket. He left quietly, locking the door behind him. The air outside felt thicker now. As he walked to his car, he caught the eyes of a neighbor across the field. An old man seated on a cracked porch swing. The man didn't wave. didn't nod, just watched him with the same dispassionate stare one might give a storm cloud forming over the horizon. Shaq drove straight back into town. He didn't go to the community center this time. He went to City Hall. The clerk at the front desk blinked at him in surprise. "Mr. O'Neal, we weren't expecting— Who do I talk to about a medical emergency response denial?" Her expression shifted instantly. "That's under the sheriff's office and county medical." "Then call them. I'm not leaving until someone explains why that woman hasn't had medical assistance in weeks." There was scrambling. Phone calls. Someone from the council was paged. Eventually, a man in a light tan suit emerged from the side hallway. He had a badge, a nameplate, and a practiced smile. "Mr. O'Neal, I'm Councilman Hartwell. Let's take this to my office." They sat across from each other. The room smelled like polished wood and artificial pine. Shaq didn't waste time. "I visited Delilah Moore's residence. She's sick, alone, and no emergency team will touch her." "Why?" Hartwell sighed, as if preparing for a speech.
"It's complicated, Mr. O'Neal. That property falls outside Windmere jurisdiction. There've been false calls. Miss Moore has a history of erratic behavior. At one point, CPS got involved. The file's closed."
Shaq leaned forward. "Closed because you wanted it quiet, or because she stopped existing in your system?" The councilman's tone shifted. "We did what we could with the information provided." "You mean she wasn't worth the effort?" Hartwell's jaw flexed. "It's not that simple." "Yes, it is," Shaq said, rising. "She and that girl were erased. And you all agreed to look the other way." The councilman stood as well, his voice cooler. "You're a guest in this town, Mr. O'Neal. Don't confuse your influence with authority." Shaq stared at him, then walked out. He didn't yell, didn't threaten. He didn't have to. He had truth, and he was done being polite about it. Later that night, Shaq returned to the trailer, this time with supplies: soup, water, electrolytes, a portable fan, medical gloves. He found Delilah unchanged but stable. As he sat beside her, he heard the door creak open behind him. Zariah stood there, her hoodie soaked from the rain. "I didn't know you'd come back," she said quietly. "I didn't know how not to." She walked in, set her backpack down, then sat on the floor beside the bed. Her fingers reached for Delilah's hand. "I keep thinking maybe she'll wake up and tell me what to do next." Shaq looked at her, his voice low. "You already know. You've been doing it." Zariah didn't cry, but something in her posture loosened. "Did they say why they stopped coming?" she asked. He paused. "They said she didn't count anymore." Zariah nodded, unsurprised. "Then I guess it's on us to remind them we do." And in that quiet room with a broken fan and a fading woman between them, something unspoken passed. Not anger, not grief. Conviction. Because beneath the politeness, the silence, and the handshakes there was rot, and now it had a name. And Shaq wasn't leaving until it was spoken out loud. There were no fences, no chains, only rules written in silence. Windmere's charm was made of bricks and secrets. The building stood proud: red brick post office, white pillared church, a town square lined with benches polished by time. But under all that symmetry and soft-spoken order was a blueprint of exclusion. Shaq had lived long enough to know that some towns don't need to say you're not welcome. They just never build a door for you to come through. Back at the motel that morning, he sat on the edge of the bed reviewing the stack of papers Kevon had printed overnight. Old newspaper clippings, scanned county records, medical files with half-erased notes. The one name that surfaced again and again: Delilah Moore. She wasn't just Zariah's caretaker. She'd once been Windmere's most respected nurse, a licensed LPN at the local health clinic, known for her calm under pressure and her quiet competence. That was until 5 years ago, when a complaint surfaced. The accusation wasn't dramatic, unprofessional behavior during a shift. The specifics were vague. A patient claimed she'd spoken aggressively. A volunteer said she was too emotionally involved with a neglected child's case. 3 weeks after that report, Delilah was let go. No hearing, no formal review. Shaq's stomach turned as he traced the timeline. Within a year, Delilah had stopped receiving calls for contract nursing. Local pharmacies denied refilling her prescriptions. Social workers stopped visiting her address. Not because she'd done anything criminal, she hadn't, but because Windmere had quietly decided she no longer fit. He tucked the papers into his backpack and left for town hall again. This time, no one greeted him at the door. The receptionist avoided his eyes. The air had shifted. His presence was no longer a novelty. It was a threat, a disruption to the system that had run undisturbed for years. Councilman Hartwell wasn't available, so they sent in Deputy Mayor Willa Bryce, an older woman with steel-colored hair and a voice that could slice marble. "You've certainly taken a deep interest in local matters, Mr. O'Neal," she said, gesturing to the stiff leather chair across from her desk. "I care about the truth, and I care about that girl." She raised an eyebrow. "Zariah." Shaq didn't respond. The way she said the name was enough, like it didn't belong in her mouth, but she used it anyway for show. "You've made it known that you disagree with how we've handled things," she continued. "But what you don't seem to understand is that Windmere isn't like other places. We look out for each other. We take care of our own." Shaq leaned forward. "What does that mean exactly? Your own?" She smiled thinly. "Families that follow the process. Households that respect the town's standards. People who show up on time, on paper, and in the right way." He stared at her. "So what was wrong with Delilah? She was a nurse. A provider. She took in a child who had no one. She took in a child with no authorization. She raised her without paperwork. No guardianship. No consent from the state. That's not caregiving, Mr. O'Neal. That's interference. She was raising a human being, not trafficking her," he said coldly. Willa folded her hands. "The child has no record, no birth certificate, no immunization. For all we know, she isn't even a citizen." "That's convenient, isn't it?" he shot back. "No records mean no obligation. No child, no case. Just a ghost in your system." For a moment, the facade cracked. Willa's lips pressed together. Her fingers tensed. Shaq stood. "You erased them. Quietly. Politely. With rules instead of ropes. You think that makes it better?" Willa rose with him. "It makes it legal." "Does it make it right?" She didn't answer. Shaq left the building, his steps heavier now, the weight of 100 decisions pressing into his back. He walked the streets without purpose, absorbing the town's quiet cruelty. The help wanted signs in shop windows that had always come down the day Delilah applied. The school that added extra ID requirements the year Zariah tried to register. The old bus stop near the south side that never had a working route. There were no signs that said no black kids allowed. But the town hadn't needed signs. It had silence, structure, and a shared understanding that didn't need to be spoken aloud. Later that afternoon, Shaq sat with Zariah on the cracked porch steps outside the trailer. Delilah was sleeping more now, her breath shallow but steady. The heat stuck to their skin like guilt that wouldn't wash off. "I went to City Hall," he said finally. She didn't respond. "I know about Delilah, about the clinic, about why they turned their backs." Still, she said nothing. "Did she ever talk about it?" Zariah stared out into the field beyond the trailer, where a rusted bicycle lay half swallowed by weeds. "She said she raised a lot of kids over the years. Not officially. Foster placements, temp care. All of them got returned. All except me. I was the one no one wanted back." Shaq's throat tightened. He let the silence hold. "She never lied to me," Zariah continued. "She said the town would never see us as family. Not the right kind. But she still tried. She used to drive me past the school on weekdays. We'd park outside and she'd teach me from the car. Said if they wouldn't let me in, she'd build me something better." "She did," Shaq said softly. Zariah blinked, like she hadn't expected to hear that out loud. He turned toward her. "They tried to erase you, but you're still here, still showing up. That's something they'll never understand." She gave a small nod, but it was the closest thing to a thank you he'd seen from her yet. That evening, Shaq held a private meeting with his foundation staff, shifting the location from the community center to the parking lot outside a coffee shop on the edge of town. Neutral ground. "I want a legal team down here," he said. "Quiet but fast. Someone to start building a paper trail. We're going to make Zariah visible."
"What about the town?" Kevon asked. "You want to go to war with them?"
Shaq shook his head. "No war, just light. They've been hiding behind shadows long enough. Time we show people what's really here." They started planning. Outreach, press, quiet documentation. But most importantly, they started listening to the people who had been made invisible too long. Because Windmere's unseen walls weren't made of stone or wood. They were made of silence, shame, and history. And Shaquille O'Neal was done being polite about any of it. Hidden beneath a loose floorboard was a letter addressed to Shaquille O'Neal, dated 2 years ago. The rain started just after dusk. Not heavy, not wild, just enough to make the trailer's roof tick with soft percussion. Zariah sat cross-legged in the corner of the living room, her back against the faded floral couch, a flashlight balanced on her knee. The power had flickered twice that afternoon and finally blinked out around 7. She didn't panic. This wasn't new. This was the kind of quiet she was born into. Delilah slept in the back room, her breaths uneven but present. The nurse from the county hospital had come earlier, arranged by Shaq's team after a flurry of calls and quiet pressure. No sirens, no fuss, just a neutral-faced woman in blue scrubs who confirmed what Zariah already knew. Delilah was fading, slow and inevitable. Shaq had stepped out to make calls from his truck, giving Zariah space, but not distance. He didn't hover, he just stayed close. She shifted her weight and reached into the crate that served as a makeshift coffee table. It was filled with old papers, bills, coupons, yellowed receipts. She wasn't looking for anything, not exactly, maybe a distraction, maybe proof that her life hadn't just happened in pieces. Her fingers brushed something stiff, smooth. A sealed envelope, crumpled at the corners, unstamped. She turned it over. Shaquille O'Neal Foundation, Atlanta office, Atten, outreach request. No return address, no date, but the name was clear. Zariah's breath hitched. She turned on the flashlight and carefully peeled the envelope open, the paper inside brittle with time. She unfolded it and began to read. Mr. O'Neal, I know this letter probably won't reach you. I know your team screens things, and I know you've got a million people asking for your help every day. But I'm not asking for me, I'm asking for her. Her name is Zariah. She's not mine, not by blood, but she is mine in every way that counts. She was left behind. I took her in. No system helped me. No one guided me. I just couldn't let her vanish like her mother did. This town has no room for us. She tried to go to school, doors locked. We tried to see a doctor, appointments canceled. I was let go from the clinic for emotional instability, but really it was because I brought Zariah to work one day, when I couldn't leave her alone. She's smart. She draws like she's got memories from lifetimes before. She doesn't speak unless she has to, but when she does, it's always the truth. And people hate the truth around here. I've tried everything. We've been invisible so long I don't even think I have a voice anymore. But I know you're still echoes, so I'm asking before I'm too tired to ask again, if someone somewhere in your world can see her. Not save her, just see her. Because if no one does, this town will keep pretending we were never here. DM Zariah didn't cry. She just held the paper like it might vanish if she let go. The letter was dated 2 years ago, long before Delilah had stopped talking, long before the days started blurring into a quiet war of survival. All this time it had sat under their roof, unsent, unheard, unread. Zariah? Shaq's voice came from the porch, cautious. I found something, she said, her voice steady but far away. He stepped inside, wiping his shoes on the mat without thinking. She held up the letter without a word. He took it from her gently, his eyes scanning each line, face unmoving. As he reached the end, he exhaled, deep and slow. Then he folded the letter carefully and sat on the couch behind her. She wrote to me, he said quietly. She didn't have a stamp, said it was stupid anyway, that people like us don't get answered by people like you. He looked at her, pained. She was wrong. She was tired. Shaq leaned back, the letter in his lap. This isn't just neglect. This is intentional. She told the truth in that letter, and this town made sure no one ever heard it. Zariah turned off the flashlight and sat still in the dim glow of a battery-powered lantern. Her eyes found his, guarded but open. I didn't come to the event to meet you. I came because I didn't know what else to do. The lights were still on there. People. Food. It looked like maybe someone would notice if I walked through the door. And they did, he said. I did. But I shouldn't have had to. He nodded. Shaq looked at the letter again, this time longer. The weight of it filled the room more than the silence ever could. Do you want the world to see this? He asked. Zariah didn't blink. I want the truth to hurt somebody the way it hurt her. Shaq stood and stepped toward the kitchen counter, where he'd left his bag. He pulled out his phone and snapped a photo of the letter, then folded it again with care, returning it to her hands. You keep the original, he said. I'll make sure the right people read it. Not just lawyers, she said quickly. Not just social workers. I want kids like me to read it. Kids who think nobody sees them. They will, he promised. He sat beside her again. The air had shifted. There was no triumph here, just the heavy stillness that comes after a buried truth has finally been unearthed. Zariah leaned her head back against the couch and closed her eyes. Shaq watched her breathe, then looked toward Delilah's room. He thought about everything that had happened. Every barrier, every omission, every polite rejection masked as procedure. This girl had not shown up by accident. She was here because the system made sure there was nowhere else to go. He stood again, quietly this time, and stepped out onto the porch. The rain had stopped. The sky was clearing, but the ground still held the weight of the storm. Shaq called Kavan.
I need this letter formatted, time-stamped, authenticated. We're going to publish it, first thing in the morning, full platform release.
You sure? That'll bring heat. I want heat, he said. I want the whole country to feel what this place tried to hide. And Zariah? She's not a project. She's a mirror, and people are about to see themselves in it, whether they want to or not. He ended the call and leaned against the railing, the wood damp beneath his hand. He looked out over the field, at the silhouette of trees shaking off the last of the rain. A letter never mailed had become a truth too loud to ignore. Tomorrow would bring questions. And for the first time in a long time, Windermere would have to answer. This town doesn't hide its secrets, it buries them under routine. By the third morning, Windermere had grown cold toward Shaq. The polite smiles had vanished. The casual hellos turned into curt nods or nothing at all. Kids were kept closer by their parents. Coffee shop conversations stopped when he walked in. The charm of a celebrity in town had worn off. Now he was something else. A disturbance. A threat. He felt it at the diner where a waitress forgot his order 3 times, then brought him the wrong plate. He felt it at the post office where the clerk turned her back mid-sentence. He especially felt it when he showed up at the community center for a scheduled youth breakfast and found the doors locked, the banner gone, the event postponed indefinitely. No phone call, no apology. Shaq didn't argue. He just pulled out his phone and hit record. Not for social media, at least not yet. This was something different, deliberate. He began documenting Windermere, not as a town, but as a system, a quiet machine built on denial. He filmed the empty playground across the tracks where kids like Zariah were never seen. He recorded the neighborhood watch signs, the support local law bumper stickers, the absence of any community bulletin with her name. He captured the stillness, the looks, the way silence filled up a room like gas. Zariah watched him from the back seat sometimes. Arms crossed, hoodie up, headphones in, but not playing anything. She didn't ask what he was doing. She knew. And he didn't explain it because the truth didn't need translation. When the video clips started going online, a few minutes at a time, nothing overtly dramatic, they drew attention. It started with a quiet ripple, comments, shares, people asking questions. Who is this girl? Why hasn't she been in school? Why has no social worker checked in? Then came the headlines. Shaquille O'Neal blows whistle on Southern town's racist neglect. Within 48 hours, everything cracked. The sheriff's office released a statement calling the videos misrepresentative of our proud and peaceful community. Councilwoman Willa Bryce went live on a local radio show and said Shaq had abused his platform to sensationalize a family tragedy. The mayor's office issued a warning to his foundation: cease recording or face legal action for filming minors without written consent. Shaq read all of it. Then he kept filming. The weight wasn't just on him anymore. It was on the story. And once a story starts moving, it gets harder to bury. Kavan brought in a small doc team from Atlanta. No big crews, just 2 handheld cameras, mics, and a mandate to tell it straight. They captured everything. Shaq narrating by a chained library gate. Zariah sketching on a porch in silence. The trailers peeling paint. The distance between what Windermere said it was and what it actually showed. And then finally someone talked. A janitor. Late 50s. Faded tattoos. Thick calloused hands. He showed up outside the church parking lot, where Shaq was filming a walk and talk about housing access. The man didn't give a name, just nodded toward the back of the building. Got something you need to know, he said. Not here. They drove to a gas station 5 miles out near the county line, sat in the back of Shaq's SUV. No cameras, no recordings. Y'all digging into that girl, the man said. Zariah. Shaq nodded. We are. I remember when her mama came here. Name was Kendra. Worked 2 jobs. Always kept her head down. Lived in the trailer park behind the lumber yard. Shaq leaned in. What happened to her? The man scratched at a scar on his neck, hesitated. They said it was an accident. She was walking home late one night. Sheriff's deputy clipped her with his cruiser near Highway 9, claimed she darted into the road. Shaq felt the slow churn in his chest. Anyone investigate, he asked. The man shook his head. Case closed within 3 days. Said she had drugs in her system, even though nobody ever saw her high. Ain't no autopsy got released, just gone. Delilah tried to raise hell. That's when they turned on her. Did anyone else know? Plenty of us did. But that town don't use fear the way big cities do. It uses comfort, reputation. People don't speak up because they don't want to lose their church pew or their job at the mill, so they pretend they don't know. Shaq sat back, jaw tight. You just told me. Why now? The man shrugged. 'Cause you're the only one who didn't pretend she wasn't real. And because that girl, she's got the same eyes her mama had, full of fight." Shaq nodded. The man handed him a napkin with a date and a name scribbled on it. "Start there. County dispatch logs. They'll try to bury it, but if you dig deep enough, you'll find it." That night, Shaq sat on the floor of the trailer beside Zariah, his laptop open, notes scattered. She watched him with the same quiet curiosity she always had. "You remember your mom?" he asked. "Sometimes," she said, "mostly how tired she was. But she sang. At night, real soft. I don't remember the words, just that her voice never shook." He hesitated, then said, "She didn't leave you, Zariah. She didn't vanish. She was hit, covered up, labeled and erased." Zariah didn't blink, didn't cry, just asked, "And now what?" "Now we say her name." Shaq posted the new clip at dawn. Just 2 sentences. Her name was Kendra. She didn't die by accident. The response was seismic. Celebrities shared it. News outlets picked it up. Protesters called for transparency. The sheriff's office shut off public comment sections. But the truth was out, and there was no taking it back. By evening, a county clerk leaked the dispatch log, confirmed a late-night call on the date written on the napkin. The responding officer's name? Deputy J. Lindell, the same man who still held his post. No disciplinary report, no media coverage, just 3 lines in the system: contact made, subject deceased, cause, vehicle collision. Shaq read it twice, then turned to Zariah. "You ready to tell your story?" She looked at the lens of the camera now perched on a tripod. For the first time, she nodded. And in that moment, a quiet girl from a forgotten trailer became the echo of every voice this town tried to bury. They say fireflies come out just before the dark gets too thick to breathe. Windmere was quieter than usual that night. Not the kind of quiet that came from peace, but the kind that warned you something was waiting just beyond the tree line. The wind had gone still. The cicadas had paused their rhythm. Even the streetlights buzzed lower, like the town had dimmed its breath. Shaq had been at the trailer since noon. Zariah had barely said a word all day. She wasn't shut down, just folded into herself, like someone expecting the sky to fall. Delilah had slept most of the afternoon. Her breathing had grown slower, more deliberate. It was clear to both of them now that time was thinning. As night crept in, Shaq suggested a walk. No cameras, no phone, just the stars, the field, and their footsteps. Zariah didn't answer. She just stood up, pulled on her hoodie, and waited by the door. They moved through the brush slowly, the field behind the trailer soft with wild grass, and the occasional crunch of broken twigs. The moon was low, orange at the edges, casting just enough light to see but not enough to feel safe. Fireflies had begun to dance across the field, blinking like Morse code in the distance. Shaq broke the silence first. "You ever see this many of them before?" Zariah didn't look up. "They come every year, just not this close." He nodded. "Guess they feel safer now." "They're bugs. Bugs don't feel anything." Shaq smiled, but it faded quickly. He looked at her, really looked. She hadn't flinched since they left the porch. Her shoulders were high, her hands tucked into her sleeves, her eyes fixed straight ahead. "You okay?" he asked. She finally turned her head. "You know, everyone thinks I wanted attention, that I showed up at your event because I needed saving." "You didn't?" "No. I showed up because the lights were still on. That's it. Just one building in this town where the door wasn't locked." Shaq's throat tightened. "I don't want to be a symbol," she said. "I don't want my name in headlines or on billboards or trending hashtags." "You're not a symbol," he said gently. "You're a story, a real one. People need to hear it." "What if I don't want them to?" she asked, her voice low but edged. He stopped walking. "Then they won't. We'll shut it all down. I'll walk away. But I need you to tell me what you want." She looked at the sky. A long pause passed. "I want to stop disappearing," she said. "That's it. I just want to be seen, not pitied, not turned into someone's nonprofit success story. Just seen like I belong here." "You do." "I didn't used to." He nodded, quiet for a moment. "Then from now on you won't be invisible," he said. "You have my word." They stood there, in the soft sway of the field, surrounded by blinking lights and the slow churn of summer air. For a moment there was stillness, not absence, but peace. Then the sound of gravel crunching broke it. Shaq turned instinctively. Behind the trailer, near where the SUV was parked under a low tree, shadows moved. Zariah followed his gaze. "Someone's out there." "Stay here," he said quickly.
No.
He paused. She stepped beside him, not hiding again. They moved as one, slow but deliberate, until they came around the side of the trailer. What they saw made both of them stop cold. Shaq's black SUV was covered in spray paint. Thick red lines, words, leave, liar, stay out. And worse, a slur stretched across the back windshield in jagged strokes. Zariah exhaled through her nose, her fists tightening. Shaq didn't yell, didn't flinch. He pulled out his phone and started recording. He walked a slow circle around the vehicle, catching every word, every inch, every threat. The glow from the porch light was just enough to make the paint shine. The video ended with a long look into the camera.
No fear, he said. No silence.
He posted it before walking back into the house. Within 10 minutes, his phone buzzed so hard it nearly slipped from his hand. Mentions, reposts, calls from journalists. The fire had begun. Zariah stood in the doorway watching him. Her eyes weren't wide. They were tired. "I didn't want this," she said. "I know. I just wanted the lights on. I know." He walked over and crouched to her level. "This isn't your fault. This is what people do when they realize their lie is bleeding. They panic. They vandalize. They threaten. But we don't leave." Zariah looked at him, voice steady. "I'm not afraid. I believe you."
But I'm tired.
He sat on the porch step beside her. The air had thickened again, like the town was holding its breath all over. "This storm," she said, "you think we'll come out the other side?" He looked at the stars overhead, then at the fireflies that still hovered, blinking without rhythm. "Storms don't break you. They show you what's still standing after the wind goes." She leaned against the wooden frame of the door, her body finally relaxing. Inside, Delilah stirred once, then settled. The trailer seemed to sigh along with her. Shaq sat with his hands in his lap. Zariah leaned beside him. They didn't speak again for a long time. The vandalism went viral overnight. News vans were already rolling in by sunrise. But for one night, in a field lit by fireflies, they held on to something louder than fear. Truth. And that kind of light, once seen, never fades. They came with cameras, but the town wasn't ready for the reflection. By the time the first satellite truck rolled into Windmere, the diner had already pulled its shades down. The mayor's office closed due to maintenance, and the church had swapped its sign from "We Welcome All" to "Closed for Private Services." The town hadn't been caught off guard by the storm. They had simply hoped it would pass. But when the Firefly video and SUV vandalism clip crossed 2 million views overnight, Windmere realized the storm wasn't weather, it was consequence. Shaq stood on the porch of the community center, with the same composure he'd carried into NBA locker rooms, courtside interviews, and charity auctions. But this was different. He wore no suit. No microphone was clipped to his shirt. Just a windbreaker zipped halfway, one hand gripping a folded note, the other resting in his pocket. In front of him, a semicircle of cameras blinked and clicked. News anchors from Atlanta, New York, even one from Los Angeles, waited to hear what he had to say. Behind them, a crowd of locals gathered. Some came out of curiosity, others out of loyalty. A few came to defend their town. Most came because they couldn't pretend anymore. Shaq didn't start with blame. He didn't start with names. He started with truth. "I came here because I was invited to speak to your youth," he said, his voice even, grounded. "I came to give, to mentor, to listen. What I didn't expect was to meet a girl named Zariah." He paused, letting the name settle like dust in the sun. "She's not famous. She's not perfect. But she's real. She's the kind of real people try to hide when it doesn't fit the picture." He unfolded the paper in his hand. It was Delilah's letter. The crowd leaned in, but he didn't read it aloud. Instead, he held it up. "This letter was written 2 years ago. It was addressed to my foundation. It never got mailed. But if it had, maybe things would have turned out different. Maybe a woman wouldn't be dying in silence. Maybe a child wouldn't have had to walk into a building alone just to be noticed." Reporters scribbled. Microphones inched closer. "I'm not here to ruin reputations. I'm not here to perform. I'm here because the truth deserves space. And this girl, this family, was denied that space. Deliberately, repeatedly, systematically." A murmur passed through the crowd. Shaq went on, slower now. "I've seen a lot in my life. Poverty, racism, loss. But I've never seen a town hide behind manners the way Windmere has. Y'all smile in your stores. You wave on your porches. But you don't see the kids sitting outside your schools. You don't hear them knocking." He looked straight into the cameras. "I hear them now, and so will you." The silence afterward was heavy, not awkward, just full, like something sacred had been said. The sheriff was the first to respond. Hours later, at a hastily arranged press conference near City Hall, Sheriff Lindell stood in front of the American flag, flanked by 2 deputies. His uniform was pressed. His tone was tight. "Mr. O'Neal's presence here has created unnecessary tension," he said. "This is a town of good people, decent people. What's happening now is media poisoning, a one-sided story built on half-truths and emotional manipulation." He didn't say Zariah's name. Not once. But not everyone followed that script. The next day, a woman named Ms. Tilda Markham, a middle school English teacher, walked out of her classroom, held her phone up, and went live on social media. "I was told not to register Zariah Moore," she said. "I was told we needed more paperwork, more proof. But when white families transferred from other towns, they didn't have to prove anything." She went on, voice trembling. "I asked questions. I was told to back off, that she was a bad fit. I knew it was wrong. But I didn't fight. I didn't push. I thought I'd lose my job." Her video crossed 500,000 views in 4 hours. Others followed. A nurse from the clinic where Delilah used to work anonymously posted her resignation letter, citing years of racially biased hiring decisions. An ex-town council aide dropped files showing zoning discrimination against minority neighborhoods. The internet was ablaze, but Windermere was imploding. Half the town hunkered down. The other half lit up. On day 4, protesters arrived, some from Atlanta, some from Birmingham. Most had never heard of Windermere before last week. Now they held signs on the courthouse lawn. Zariah deserved better. Say her name, Kendra Moore. No more nice racism. The sheriff ordered increased patrols. Streets were blocked. Local news spun stories of external agitators. But the truth was, Windermere wasn't under siege. It was under reflection. And the mirror was unforgiving. Shaq stayed mostly silent in public after the initial press conference. Not out of fear, out of focus. He spent his days coordinating medical care for Delilah, arranging temporary guardianship paperwork, meeting with civil rights lawyers, and filming quiet moments with Zariah. She hadn't said much since the walk through the fireflies, but she sat beside him every day, sometimes sketching, sometimes watching. The world no longer questioned her existence, but she still wasn't sure she believed it. One afternoon, a CNN reporter tried to ambush them in the parking lot of the motel where Shaq had relocated temporarily. The reporter pushed a mic forward. "Zariah, what do you want people to learn from your story?" Zariah looked up. "Nothing." The reporter blinked. "Nothing? I don't want to teach people how to be human. That's not my job." Then she turned and walked away. It was the most shared clip of the week. At the end of that night, Shaq sat alone in the community center, now open again, though mostly empty. The mural wall still stood, untouched. He looked at the photos of kids from previous years, faces smiling, all accounted for. Except one. He picked up a marker and wrote something small in the corner of the wall. Some stories are too real to smile for. When he stepped outside, he found Zariah waiting by the door. She held out her sketchpad. On the page was a drawing of the town, not as it was, but as it had been that week. Reporters on sidewalks, protesters on lawns, her standing in the center, tiny but unshaken. Behind her, a figure in shadow, Delilah, with soft eyes, holding the letter like a lantern. She handed it to him. "Now they see me," she said. And he nodded. Yes, they do. Every lie eventually meets the one truth, sharp enough to shatter it. Windermere woke to a different kind of morning. The sun still broke across the rooftops like it always had. The air still carried that damp southern weight, but something was different. It wasn't the media trucks or protest signs, or even the sound of Zariah's name echoing through 100 retweets. It was what had cracked beneath the surface. What was broken, now visible. Shaq stood in the county archive room, a narrow brick building on the edge of town behind the library, where most people assumed nothing important had been kept. Inside, Kayvon worked the scanner, his fingers moving with focused urgency as faded documents came to life on screen. He'd gotten access through a quiet clerk who had watched the news, waited until her manager stepped out for lunch, then slid them a key. The files were older than most cell phones, handwritten in ink that had begun to blur, dates circled in red pencil, notes scribbled in the margins. But the names were clear. Kendra Moore. Filed complaint. Discrimination. Employment. Filed complaint. Medical neglect. 2010. Filed complaint. Harassment. 2011. Final note. Fatal pedestrian incident. Highway 9, May 2012. Case closed in 72 hours. No further action. Shaq stared at the last line for a long time. Then he turned to the next folder. Delilah Moore. Filed, Petition to reopen investigation. Filed. Request for foster parent application denied. Filed request for school enrollment waiver for dependent minor denied. Filed medical license review, suspended. Termination issued, clinic policy violation. No rehire recommended. Everything Delilah had told him. Everything Zariah had lived. It wasn't just a tragedy. It was a chain of deliberate decisions, paper trails soaked in ink and denial. Kevon exhaled, softly. You were right. It was never one thing. It was everything. Shaq nodded. One lie gets buried. 100 create a system. He folded the copies carefully, tucked them into a black folder. This wasn't about press anymore. This was about accountability. Proof. They left the archive and headed straight for the church, where civil rights attorney Glenna Briggs waited with her legal team. She was already seated in one of the pews, dressed in dark gray slacks and an open-collared blouse, her notepad open on her lap, expression already 10 steps ahead of whatever they would say. I've reviewed your footage. The letter. The public record, Glenna said. But if this goes to court, I'll need documentation that shows a consistent pattern of institutional discrimination, not just emotion. Shaq handed her the folder. You'll find decades of it right there. She scanned a few pages, then closed the folder. We file next week, she said. Class action. Zariah as the lead. We go after the sheriff's office, the school board, and the health clinic. But you understand what that means? I do. They'll dig through everything. Delilah's past, Kendra's history, Zariah's guardianship. They'll weaponize every mistake. Shaq nodded again. Then we meet them with the truth. Glenna looked at him, then back toward the altar. It's rare that we get to hold the system accountable while the person they tried to erase is still alive, she said. We don't waste that. Outside, the protest had swelled. Students from surrounding counties had joined. A busload of college kids from Alabama State marched down the square with signs reading, Kendra was here. Drone cameras buzzed overhead. National pundits debated Zariah's case on morning talk shows. And inside the town's walls, people finally started breaking rank. A former social worker published a blog post detailing how her superiors ignored child wellness reports for families without verified assets. A retired teacher gave an anonymous interview, confessing that certain student files, including Zariah's, were routinely removed before registration meetings. Then, the final crack came. A video surfaced, dated 2012, pulled from old gas station surveillance. The footage was grainy but clear enough. A woman slim, black, walking down Highway 9 at dusk. A police cruiser coming fast around the curve. No warning, no brake lights, just impact. The video had never been submitted into evidence. Somehow it had sat in a private security drive until someone no name attached sent it to a journalist. Within the hour, justice for Kendra trended across the country. By nightfall, a special state investigator had been appointed to reopen the case. Sheriff Lindell gave a stiff statement under the county seal. We followed protocol based on the evidence presented to us at the time. No one believed him. In the midst of the chaos, Shaq returned to the trailer. Zariah was on the floor by Delilah's bed, her sketchpad open but untouched. Delilah's breathing had become shallow, intermittent. Her skin was pale, her hands unmoving. Shaq sat beside Zariah, and for a while, they just listened, to the wind through the trees, to the silence between heartbeats. Finally, Zariah spoke. They kept saying we weren't real. He nodded. And now the world knows you are. She looked at him. What happens when the cameras leave? Shaq reached into his jacket and handed her a worn copy of the letter, the one Delilah had written him. You write another one, he said, to whoever's next, to whoever thinks they're alone. Zariah took the letter and folded it slowly. I don't want to become someone's example, she said. You already are, he said. But you get to choose what kind. Delilah passed away that night, without fanfare, without pain. Her hand in Zariah's, her face turned toward the window where moonlight spilled in like a final blessing. They held no funeral. Zariah said Delilah hated speeches. Instead, they took her ashes to the edge of the field where the fireflies first danced, spread them beneath the tree that never stopped blooming, even when the season said it should. News stations tried to cover the moment. Shaq declined them all. This part's just for her, he told them. A week later, the lawsuit was filed. The state reopened, not just Kendra's case, but 7 others. Patterns, trails, more lives nearly erased. Windermere tried to breathe, to pretend it hadn't always known, but the mask had cracked too wide. The church attendance dropped. The school board resigned. Sheriff Lindell stepped down quietly under personal pressure. The mayor retired early. Ms. Callahan moved north. No headlines scream justice served, because justice didn't look like a ribbon cutting. It looked like empty chairs at council meetings. It looked like a black girl walking down Main Street without people whispering. It looked like paperwork that no longer disappeared. Shaq didn't stay much longer. The work had begun. Others would carry it. But before he left, he sat with Zariah on the steps of the old community center, once a gatekeeper, now a shelter. She passed him her latest sketch. It was Delilah, sitting on that porch, eyes forward. Beside her, Kendra stood, not ghostly, not blurred, clear and alive in Zariah's hands. Below the drawing was one sentence. "They tried to bury us, but forgot we were seeds." Shaq nodded. No applause, no speech. Just truth. And that was what finally broke them. Some homes are built with nails and bricks, others with voices and truth. Zariah didn't pack much when the time came. Just a backpack with her sketchbooks, Delilah's letter, and a worn hoodie that still smelled like her. The rest she left behind. There were no framed photos, no drawers of mementos, no trophies or childhood clutter. Just quiet air, a sun-faded floor, and a wind chime that hadn't moved in weeks. The trailer was being sold to cover final expenses. Shaq had offered to buy it outright, but Zariah refused. "Let it go," she said. "We were never safe there, we were just surviving." Delilah had passed with dignity. She'd been moved to a hospital in Atlanta once things were calm enough, the machines humming softly until her body simply let go. There was no dramatic ending, no TV cameras at the bedside, just Shaq and Zariah, one on either side, holding her hands until the light dimmed from her chest. She was buried quietly, with a marker that simply read, "Delilah Moore, mother, fighter, home." After that, Shaq made the arrangements. Not charity, not pity, just logistics handled with care. Zariah would be placed with a mentor family through the foundation. David and Camilla Rivers, a middle-aged black couple in Atlanta who had previously fostered 2 teens and worked with inner-city youth programs for years. Educated, grounded and loving, without expectation. They were the kind of people who didn't try to fix trauma. They just made space for it. When Zariah met them, she didn't smile. But she didn't flinch either. She sat with her arms folded on the couch while Camilla offered tea, and David asked if she liked music. She said she liked silence. They nodded, like that made perfect sense. Shaq stood near the door during the visit, watching her from a distance. She was still Zariah, guarded, sharp-eyed, motionless, until moved, but he saw something loosening in her posture. A different kind of weight shifting. Camilla pulled her into a tour of the home. Simple but warm. One room had been cleared out for her. Desk by the window, bookshelf half-stocked, a chair in the corner by a lamp. Not a room made for her, just a room made ready. After she'd seen it all, Zariah stepped outside and sat on the front steps. Shaq followed a minute later. "They're not Delilah," she said. "No," he agreed. "They're not." She looked ahead at the street clean, quiet, shaded by tall trees. No sirens, no smoke, just life passing by like it had nothing to fear. "But they're not Windermere either." "No," he said again. "They're not." That night she slept in a bed that didn't creak, under a ceiling with no leaks. The next morning she made her own toast, then watched a hawk circle the sky from the back deck. No one called her strange. No one asked for ID. Still, healing wasn't instant. She didn't cry. She didn't laugh. She drifted, but not aimlessly. Just carefully. Like someone relearning the rhythm of trust. Weeks passed. School enrollment was filed. Therapy appointments began. Light and voluntary. Zariah said very little, but she sketched constantly. Camilla started pinning the pages to the wall by her door. A month later, Zariah agreed to speak at a middle school assembly in Atlanta. The principal had seen her on TV, watched her interviews, and invited her not as a guest but as a voice, one that the students, mostly black and brown, desperately needed to hear. Shaq drove her there himself. On the ride over, she didn't rehearse, didn't ask for feedback. She just stared out the window as the city stretched ahead, her headphones resting in her lap. The gymnasium was packed, kids sitting cross-legged on the floor, teachers leaning against walls, lights dimmed just enough to focus attention forward. A simple podium, no cameras, no stage lights. When they introduced her, she walked up slowly. She didn't wear anything fancy, just jeans, a long-sleeved shirt, and her scuffed sneakers. She looked out at the crowd, not with nerves, but with that same look she always gave when something mattered. And then she spoke. "My name is Zariah. I'm not here to tell you how to be better people. I'm not your lesson. I'm not your inspiration." A few kids laughed quietly, confused maybe, or just caught off guard. I came from a town that forgot me. They called it a mistake, an oversight, but really they knew exactly what they were doing. The room fell quiet. My mother, Delilah Moore, wasn't my real mom, but she raised me. She protected me, and when she needed help, no one came. She paused, just enough. But you don't need to know that part. What you need to know is this: I'm still here. I made it out not because someone saved me, but because someone saw me. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. So if you see someone sitting alone, if you see someone always quiet, someone who disappears when things get hard, don't just feel sorry, see them, because that might be the only thing keeping them standing. A teacher wiped her eyes. A boy in the back nodded so slowly it almost looked like prayer. I don't want to be a headline. I want to be someone who didn't vanish. Then she stepped back. No applause cue. Just silence, the respectful kind. The kids looked at her like she was real. Not mythic, not tragic, just true. Shaq watched from the far wall, sunglasses hiding nothing. The tears came slow, unexpected, not because she was performing, but because she wasn't. She had taken the most broken parts of her life and turned them into a window, and dared the world to look through it. After the event, she didn't linger. She walked straight outside and sat on the edge of the school stairs. Shaq joined her. You did something brave, he said. I said something true, she replied.
That's always the same thing.
She took a deep breath. Is this what home is supposed to feel like? Shaq looked around at the school, the kids running in the yard, the city humming just beyond the trees. Home isn't where it's quiet. It's where you don't have to disappear. She nodded. He stood. Come on, let's go find some bad cafeteria pizza. She rolled her eyes. As long as I don't have to pretend it tastes good. He laughed, and for the first time in months, she laughed too. Not loud, not forced, just enough to let the world know she was still unfolding. And in that moment it was clear, the town hadn't broken her. It had revealed her, and now, she was building something that couldn't be torn down. Not by silence, not by shame, by truth, and the kind of home you carry with you. When silence breaks, even the ground remembers the weight of what was buried. It had been 7 months since Shaq last saw the edge of Windmere's main road. The cracked welcome sign was still standing, but someone had repainted it. Same colors, same words, but without the smug little tagline underneath that used to read, "Where Southern Hospitality Lives." Now it was just the name. Plain, honest. The town hadn't grown. The buildings were still small. The air still sticky in that way only deep southern spring can be. But something had shifted in the air. Not louder, just unguarded. The way people glanced up instead of away. The way doors didn't click shut as he passed. Shaq parked near the post office and stepped out alone. No camera crew. No staff. Just him, a plain jacket, and a bouquet of white lilies in his hand. He walked slowly through downtown, nodding at a few shopkeepers who, to his surprise, nodded back. No one offered thanks. No one asked for pictures. He wasn't a celebrity anymore in this place. Just a man returning to check the pulse of something that had been flatlined far too long. The town had changed, but not dramatically. There were no murals of Zariah, no statues of Delilah. Windermere hadn't dressed itself in guilt. What had changed were the little things. The community board in front of City Hall now had flyers in Spanish and Creole. The school had hired its first black principal. The sheriff's office, reduced to a slimmed-down department under new leadership with public records accessible by QR code posted on the window. Even the diner had a new owner, a young black woman named Trina, who nodded when Shaq stepped in, served him a cup of black coffee, and said nothing more than, "Been a minute." That was enough. He didn't stay long, just sipped the bitter warmth and stared out the window, where the breeze moved the trees in slow arcs, like the town was finally breathing at a normal pace. Then he drove. He didn't need directions. The path to the trailer was embedded in his memory, and though the trees had grown out and the gravel had shifted, the route was as clear as the feeling in his chest. Delilah's trailer was gone. The lot had been cleared, the earth flattened, and a small sign now sat where the steps once sagged. Land reclaimed. Future site of Moore Memorial Garden. Community donations welcome. He parked by the tree where fireflies had once danced, stepped out with the lilies, and walked the path to the back corner of the plot. Delilah's marker was still simple. Delilah Moore, mother, fighter, home. Someone had left a stone sketch of a lily beside it. Handmade. Weather-worn. Shaq knelt and placed the bouquet gently by the stone. No words at first. Just silence. Not the kind Windmere had once used like a knife. This was a silence of reverence, of memory. "I kept my promise," he said quietly. She's safe. He stayed there for a while, hands resting on his knees. He didn't cry. The tears had come and gone. What remained was stillness, the kind that doesn't ask for more. He stood slowly, brushing dust from his jeans, and looked around the empty field. There were no cameras, no interviews, no applause, only growth. And then he got back in his truck and took one last ride, down the old gravel path that had once led him to a girl with fire in her eyes, and too many truths for one town to hold. He passed the empty road, the now shuttered sheriff's office, the corner where Kendra had been struck and never spoken of again. A small sign now marked the site. In memory of those we failed, may we never again look away. It wasn't justice, but it was acknowledgement. He left town before noon. By evening, he sat in the back of a small classroom in Atlanta, hidden among a group of folding chairs and quiet students. Camilla had texted him earlier that week. Zariah is reading her piece tonight at the youth showcase. Thought you might want to see. The room was filled with kids, parents, notebooks, and raw nerves. An open mic stood at the front, simple and unthreatening. Zariah waited her turn in a black hoodie, sleeves pushed up, her sketch pad in her lap. When they called her name, she didn't hesitate. She walked up like she wasn't being watched, like she had no fear left to burn through. She opened her pad, looked out and said, "My name is Zariah Moore. Some of you know my story. Some of you don't. That's okay. I'm not here for attention. I'm here because my mom was sick, so I came instead." She paused. No sound in the room. And maybe I was supposed to. There was something in her tone that didn't need volume. Just wait. They told me I didn't belong. They wrote me out, but I kept writing back. I wasn't loud, but I was still here. She turned the page and read, "Sometimes you don't build a home with walls. You build it with witnesses, with the ones who didn't walk away, with names that never made it on paper, but still make it in your voice when you stand and say,
I was never a mistake. I was the proof.
She closed her pad and stepped down. The applause didn't explode. It rolled through the room like a wave, slow, then deep, then rising. Shaq didn't move, didn't wipe his eyes, just watched. Camilla leaned over and whispered, "She's been writing every night, says she's working on a book." He smiled. Zariah came back to her seat, caught his eye, and nodded once. He nodded back. That was their whole conversation. And it was enough. Outside, the city lights blinked against the dusk, not unlike fireflies. But this time, the dark wasn't too thick to breathe. This time, someone had already lit the way. If this story made you pause, look deeper, or feel something you couldn't name, don't walk away. Start noticing the Zariahs in your own town, your own school, your own silence. Listen longer, stand taller, and when the system shrinks someone, be the reason they don't disappear. This isn't the end. It's where you come in.